moving over to the new system. You will be getting a new username and password, and so that's part of the emails that will be going out to people according to their current email addresses that we have on hand. And as you know, over the past several months, my staff have been busy contacting all of the hospitals and EMS and asking them to please update their accounts. And we have updated hundreds of accounts we know when we have bad emails because they come back to us. So we've addressed all of that. But you know, this is a constantly changing thing, and we do have somewhere between, I think the latest number I heard was around 6,000 total users in our system, because each hospital and EMS can have more than one person assigned to their account. So that's a lot to keep up with. So we're do our best, you know, to try to make sure that all those emails are accurate, because that's one of the main mechanisms for getting messages out to all of our customers. We also do post messages up on our website when we have new things happening. We've posted up, you know, webinars that we've done in the past and different documents, and we'll continue to do that so that people can at least go to the website to get information if perhaps they didn't receive an email.
Are there other questions from committee members? Any questions for Tammy and Robert from the audience?
I'm Sally Snow from Fort Worth. I'd like to know if you guys have presented what you have ready to the work group, to the registry work group. Have they seen the registry demo?
The Registry Solution Work Group, as well as all of you, have seen the demo. We've done that in a webinar before. And most recently, the Registry Solution Work Group has been going through the Hospital Wizard with us. And a wizard is a tool to use to do data entry, pulls questions from different question packages and puts them in an order for data entry. So they've seen that the last 3 times that we've met. We also asked for volunteers just to go through the question packages, and that was a one-on-one, and we didn't have any EMS volunteers, by the way, but we did have 6 different hospitals that volunteered, and they each individually met with Laura and went through the question packages. So what we did on those, they were a go-to meeting, and Laura would turn over the control to them, and then they could use their mouse and they could click on the questions and they could enter in data to see what happened.
And what was their feedback?
We had a lot of feedback. A lot of it had to do with the flow of the data. So the suggestion that was one of the biggest overall suggestions that was made is that we follow the same order as NTDB. So we recently changed all the order of all of those questions. They are in the order of NTDB now. And then another suggestion, there were lots of suggestions about individual data elements and different ideas about how to have them perform better, or perhaps there's a data element that didn't have dates that went with it, and somebody said that should also have dates and times to go with it. So there's a lot of things that you think about after you start to see the system. And so we've had pages and pages of those suggestions, and then we have gone and addressed all of those suggestions that were made to us, brought them back to the Registry Solution Work Group. If it was something that DSHS could not change on their own and we needed our vendor to help us, then we've conveyed that to our vendor, and we're already starting work on some of those things. Let's see, what else? The other big suggestions have been on the performance improvement module. And so we had, RSWG had a recommended list of performance improvement questions that we had already built. But then as we started going through the data entry part of it, it occurred to them that for level 3s and 4s, we really needed to model a lot more questions that were similar to what people who have trauma registry software in their hospitals have. And so we've begun work on that as well.
What about the data dictionary? Is it done?
We haven't worked on the data dictionary yet. As you know, the majority of the questions are based on NTDB, so we'll probably be using...
Data dictionary.
Yes, they have data dictionary. So we'll be using a lot of that. Also, I'd like to get together a work group. Doesn't necessarily have to only be RSWG who does every single task that needs to be done. Like I've been saying at some other meetings, you can start working with us on different projects, and you can choose that you want to be involved in a particular part of what we're doing. That way, for instance, if you wanted to be a person involved with helping us on the data dictionary, then you could say, I'll commit to that and I'll work with you for the next 6 weeks on the data dictionary, but I don't have time to participate, all year long with everything that RSWG is going to be working on. But we do want to get together a group of people who will be dedicated to helping us to do that, because in addition to a data dictionary, what we really need is a manual of procedures. Because we need not only what does the data element mean, the definition of it, the format of it, that sort of thing, we also need to have instructions about what you do if this or that or the other scenario comes up, and that's a manual of
And you
procedures.
said one other thing that gave me one other question. You said that the identification modules where hospitals will go in and put in their information may not be ready for go live. So my question is, what does go live mean?
Let me clarify that for you. Everything that you have in there about your hospital or EMS right now will be in the new system. You will be able to go to the question package that has other information about your entity that you haven't answered in the past. That'll be there from the first day that you have access to the system. What's not there in the registration model is all of the automated process for going through online training and signing your system user agreement. All of that is what is being automated for new people coming in, instead of having to do that paper packet like we've done in the past. So right now, if you're a hospital, there's a lot of questions that NTDB ask about your hospital that you've never answered in our system before. So from the first day that you come in, you will be able to go to that question package, and you will be able to answer those questions. Yeah.
So it's just the training piece.
The training, the electronic memorandum of understanding or business associate agreement that you have with the RAC, and the system user agreement are the things that are automated in that registration part, along with the training on what it means when you're signing the user system agreement, that sort of thing. That's what is not going to be available until probably October.
So on go live day,
Yes.
what goes live?
On Go Live Day, you can enter data for any of the reportable injuries in Texas. You can go to your account and add more information about your entity. You can send a file. You can do web data entry. You can do ad hoc reports, which are the simple counts I was talking about. You can extract down your own data that you have entered.
So old data will be available on go live day?
So far, we're looking at how much of it will be available, and so I can't really answer that right now. We've had a change at DSHS as well, actually with the whole HHSC enterprise, where we've changed vendors. It's no longer IBM. We have a new vendor who is doing our data warehouses. That has created a lot of changes on our data storage capacity and on our building of new systems as well as our existing systems. So I can't tell you how much of the old data is going to be available starting from day one. I probably can give you an update on that as the summer progresses and then the new contractor that takes IBM's place gets in there and gets established with us.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that question. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, if not, I have to say a word of commendation, Tammy and Robert. I got to Texas 4 years ago, and all I heard about were all the problems with the trauma registry and things like that. And I, for one, have been very impressed with the thoroughness of the process that you've gone through, taking the feedback, obtaining feedback, and incorporating the feedback from the end users into as you move forward with the new trauma registry. So I think we're all excited about the future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, next thing on the agenda is we had planned to talk about strategic planning. And I think we announced at the last meeting that the Injury Prevention Committee had embarked on a strategic planning process. After that, I visited with some officials at GETAC, and was told that GETAC is actually embarking on, the council in general is embarking on a strategic planning process that they hope to have finished by sometime in the fall, and that they would prefer that the injury committee wait before we move forward with strategic planning for just the committee, so that we can make sure that our activities and things like that align with the general counsel, which makes perfect sense. So in lieu of doing strategic planning, the committee has talked about, what are some things that we can do going forward that would provide, be beneficial and provide good resources and materials to the injury prevention community in Texas. And one of the things that we talked about is continuing with the process of developing some strategies around the spectrum of prevention. And those of you who were with us, I believe, in November, heard Jen Northway kind of describe what the spectrum of prevention is. And also she had developed kind of a draft for alcohol-related motor vehicle crashes. So I think what the committee is going to do going forward is work on some spectrums based on what either the leading causes of injury death in Texas, or and what I'm looking for probably from the committee as well as outside perspective too, are if it's not the leading causes of injury death, what are the things that Texas injury and violence prevention folks what injury activities are they doing right now? So for example, if you're doing mostly car seat related stuff, then that's probably the spectrum we need to work on. If you're doing mostly older adult falls, that may be the spectrum that we need to work on. But I'm going to ask Kara too, and Kara, it's I believe called IP committee. It's there it is. One of the things that we've done in the last few months is, go ahead and skip to the next one, is on the Centers for Disease Control website, the Injury Center's website, they have a tool called Whiskers, and it's you can actually query data by state. And what I've done here is put up and looking at Whiskers data from 2003 to 2007. I believe 2007 is the most recent data on the site. The Whiskers site will actually figure the rates. So these are rates per death rates only. Per 100,000 population. I think this is good information to have. Obviously, the data that Tammy and her folks are going to have are going to be even more important, because not only is it death data, but it's going to be severe injury data and trauma data and things like that. And I think it helps us build the case for injuries. But what I've done here is just compared the U.S. rates or Texas to the U.S. rates. So you can see and these are basically some of the leading categories and stuff. You can see how Texas compares to the U.S. And this is going to be available on the DSHS website after the meeting. So you're going to be able to have access to it if you don't want to have to go through the whole, looking at Whiskers and doing the analysis and downloading the information yourself. But anyway, this just kind of compares Texas to the U.S. And then on the following slides, what I did was compared Texas to the states that are in our immediate region, as well as, and don't flip the slide yet, Kara, but Texas is now part of a CDC-funded regional injury network. And not only are we with the states right here that we typically have understood to be part of our network, we're in a 13 state network that now includes also as far east as Kentucky, North Carolina, and South Carolina, and Florida. So in the next few slides, what you're going to see is how Texas compares to those states. And actually, I forgot I had this slide in first. This slide is actually how Texas compares to the most populous states. So Texas being one of the most populous states, this is how we compare to California, Florida, Illinois, New York. And then the next few slides, you'll see how and you can go ahead and flip it, Kara. You did. To the regional network slides. The asterisk on New Mexico for drownings age 1 to 4 is they didn't have numbers high enough to be able to calculate reliable rates. so, anyway, and you go ahead and flip the next one. I thought that this might be helpful in helping us decide what we want, in addition to the alcohol-related spectrum of prevention, what is the next spectrum that we want to potentially look at. So.
Well, and just as a reminder for those who maybe were not able to be here, the spectrum of prevention, the purpose of that is it divides out in 6 different ways, places for you to plug in, depending on your resources and your materials that you might have available at your facility, within your EMS company, or within your particular county. So our hope is to really give you guys some better tools, looking at kind of this spectrum. You know, do you want to plug in on a policy side? Do you want to plug in internally and look at your own organizational policies? So our hope is that by injury, we'll be able to give you some best practices or some recommended strategies to really address a particular injury topic for your area. Again, considering what level facility you are, considering your own resources, both monetary and manpower. And so there is a general spectrum of prevention that was put together that gives you an idea of some just general activities that would fall under each category. And then again, we went a step further with the alcohol-related motor vehicle crashes, just because most of us already are dedicating quite a bit of resources in our community to address that issue. We thought that would be the easiest kind of slide into understanding the spectrum and how it can be a useful tool for you. And so now we want to go a step further and be able to put together some other resources for the injury issues that are most pressing for all of us or for your community. And we know that some of them, there are going to be gaps. And there are going to be some injury issues where we may not be able to have as an expansive of a spectrum with suggested activities as we might for others. But we certainly want to start that process.
And I think,
Thank you for letting me jump
having
in.
been in the injury prevention field for several years now, one of the things that I hear most often is, well, I'm new, what can I do?
Right.
What's something I do? And we usually are asked for a cookbook of things with, oh, okay, I want to be able to take a program off a shelf and just implement it in my community. And so what we're going to try to do with the spectrum is literally give you we use the term evidence-based or evidence-informed a lot. And I have a lot of people come up to us and say, well, where do I find evidence-informed? And so what we're going to try and do with the spectrum for the different categorical topics are say, okay, if you're doing motor vehicle safety, these are the things you should be doing. If you're doing falls among older adults, these are the things that have been proven effective and stuff.
As well as with some resources where we can.
Right.
I mean, if there are organizations that you can tap into for free materials, and we want to be able to list some of those things too. But as you know, some of that stuff tends to fluctuate with grant funding or just nonprofit organizations sometimes switch focus. So where we can provide resources on organizations for you to go to, we will. But the purpose of this is to give you some strategies so then you can delve into locally finding folks to help you or organizations to help you accomplish those strategies. Thank you for letting me jump in.
Well, thank you for jumping in. Stuart, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I'm Stuart from Dell Children's Medical Center. I just wanted to ask, as a part of that, can you also add a component that would say interventions or things that are proven that don't work? I mean, it's important for us to understand, but it's also what does work, but it's also very important so that we can learn as we move forward what isn't working.
Agreed.
And what's evidence-informed as far as not working.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up. I know we discussed that. Stuart and Julia and I were at a national conference last week, and we had that discussion. And so, yes, in addition to showing the things that do work, we intend to show the things that don't work and provide the references as to the articles and the literature that has shown that it doesn't work. So, what I think I'd like to do for the first is with the committee is just get your thoughts and feedback on what we should do first in terms of, which spectrum you'd like to work on, you'd like to see the group develop first, or. And again, this can be based on data. I think data is important, but if most people are doing something in on a particular topic or category, I think it's probably more important to get that information out.
And then Kara, could you flip back to that slide that showed the data, if you don't mind?
Showed what now?
The first slide that showed Texas in comparison to the United States on the different injury issues. There you go. Thank you. That might help us in our conversation.
Yeah, come on.
It might be helpful to break this data out by age, because while motor vehicle injuries may be very prevalent in the adult population, we may have done a better job with car seat instruction for the pediatric population. So I think it's important to break this out as well.
I think that's a very good point. And the other thing on my notes that I have is that Stuart reminded me last week that on the CDC website, Whiskers website, they do have the capability now to look at it by cost and do cost comparisons per state. And since I've been traveling for the last 2 weeks, I haven't had a chance to do that. But that's the other thing that we, now I think the cost data is older, 2005. But we can at least show like what are the most costly injuries as well.
Mm-hmm. Which is good.
Ram, do you have a comment?
With what?
Public education, I agree with you, Ram, because the first step really, well, a lot of times the first step is raising awareness within the community that it is an issue, so you can get folks buy-in.
So are you suggesting doing an all-injury?
You know, I don't know about all injury, but
Spectrum
the
or-
spectrum should, I think that the spectrum should start with an awareness, something.
I agree. I think it's something that we've discussed in the past, that just elevating the idea that injury prevention matters and is cost-effective is something that we need to educate just the general community on.
Others, Linda?
Yeah, I think you need to educate the community, but I think you need a lot of buy-in. Coming from a small facility, I need some education for my administration. I think not only does your community need to know, but I think people who run the hospitals, and I don't know about EMS, but just speaking from a hospital perspective, you need to get some buy-in from your administration, because injury prevention, when it comes down to the steps on a ladder, is the very bottom rung. It's not an important thing, you know, and the less money that's spent, the better. So I think there needs to be some buy-in only with, you know, educating your facilities, not only the community, but these industries and things. Injury prevention is a big thing.
And I'm glad you brought that up too. There have been a lot of discussions among state health departments trying to just get buy-in from their health director that injury prevention is important. And the Safe States Alliance has developed a tool or a publication called Making the Case for Injury Prevention. And it's available on the Safe States website. And I think that that's another thing that we'll try and make available on the GETAC website. But it gives some practical suggestions on how to get injury prevention on the state health director's radar. But I'm wondering if it might also be applicable to a hospital administrator or, you know, the head of an industry or business or.
I think that it could potentially be a tremendous resource for a lot of our level 4, level 3s as they are trying to move forward. I know that when I was in a hospital system, there was that challenge as well. I mean, I was blessed to be a full-time injury person, but I think there's always that challenge. And I think if we can also arm our folks with the information to demonstrate the importance and the reason that injury prevention is part of that trauma designation to the administrators. I mean, obviously, those of us that are invested in this area, we understand it, we know why, but I think providing those additional tools are helpful. So I would definitely, I mean, it's kind of outside the spectrum, but I think this is something good to put up on our list for things
You
to
know,
do for
I'm
the
not
work
sure
day.
it's outside the spectrum. And, you know, just based on Linda's comment, I think that it would fall under making those organizational changes. So I think it does.
Very good point. Very
and
good point.
educating providers and things like that.
Very
So
good point.
I think it falls right into the spectrum.
Good point.
We all have, or should have as part of the survey, to have injury prevention programs in our common department. So hopefully this will
Yeah, I was going to just add that awareness and organizational change is for sure one of those levels in the spectrum, but it is just one, and so we ought to think, I mean, maybe that's a first step for the committee to start with that, and I agree that there's a need for that, but, you know, to not forget about the other layers in that pyramid and the other ways to influence change. The other thing I was going to say, and I'm going to pick up something that Paula would say, I think, if she were here, and that is that although the ACS does require hospitals to have injury prevention programs, the actual requirements are fairly limited, and so it helps us to some degree, but it's certainly not as big of a stick as we would like sometimes. And so we can use it, but I know that you know, a lot of us go above and beyond those sort of minimum requirements, and so some facilities are meeting that requirement and may not be doing what we think they should be doing beyond that.
Another good point.
Any comments or suggestions from the audience on what you would like to see, or a categorical area, whether it's, you know, motor vehicle safety or drownings or whatever? Is there an area that you would like to see the committee focusing on initially?
I think hands down, looking at the data that's presented, falls appears to be the biggest issue. And I think that that's, you know, as our population's getting older and resources are limited, I think that's where we should initially start our focus. I think that as an injury prevention GETAC, we need to get the ball rolling, and then we need to do something. Mm-hmm. So bringing it back down to the state level, I think we should start on falls and actually get something done. And that way we can decrease.
I will say this as just like a caveat to the falls issue. I mean, I would agree. I think that's been top of mind for many of us in this room for several years, that we've got to still look at what's going on with the geriatric fall issue. And I will just, to your point earlier, one of the things that we've really tried to do through the spectrum and providing the information underneath each heading is to keep in mind that we want to only list underneath there the evidence-informed strategies and practices. And so just as an asterisk, if you will, falls still presents our greatest challenge just because there's not a lot. I mean, it's a research topic, but I don't think we're going to find, and I hope I'm wrong, but we might find ourselves in a situation where we might not have as much information or as much guidance to provide as we'd like to, so we might have to figure out a way to start be a little bit more of a trailblazer for this issue, because it is a pressing issue. It's something that our community needs more information about, something we need to try to be able to address, but there are some limitations with the strategies that are out there as evidence informed for that particular entry topic.
And I might add, and I agree with you, Jen, I might add that last week when we were at the Safe States meeting there, CDC's putting a lot of emphasis on falls among older adults. It's one of their focus areas, and so they're funding some research right now. And we heard about some new research that they're doing, but also some new tools that they are developing to be able to provide to providers to do some assessments and things like that. So
Great.
I think there is information coming.
Good.
I might ask, can I just get a show of hands of those in the audience? How many are working, whose facilities are working on older adult falls or have older adult falls programs? And so I mean, would you all agree that that would be a good place to start as well, or would you like to see something on older adult falls? Or?
Show of hands. If yes, a show of hands, I guess. Okay, good. That's funny.
Oh, Stuart.
I think one of the things that's really important, no matter what injury mechanism that you're looking at, is you need to look within that injury mechanism for what are the main events that are happening. So in older adult falls, where are they falling? Why are they falling?
Right.
And address those issues, not just the entire spectrum of it. So
Right, there would be no way. It would definitely have to be situational and explain those pieces.
I would like to add, I know that there are funds now coming down through the state, through the area agencies on aging, They are putting a new emphasis this contract year on their fall prevention programs. So there will be a wonderful relationship that we can build, that there might actually be some resources there that we could join and blend our resources and our expertise and maybe be able to take a bigger, fuller program out.
Okay. Any other comments from the group or questions? Okay, Kara?
Sorry.
Yeah,
It's
that's okay.
cutting out, sorry.
If you would just get to, after the spectrum, there is, we're going to move to announcements. And while you're pulling that up, which is actually the website, I'm going to let Juliet say a few words about the Texas Injury Conference.
Thank
Go ahead
you.
and scroll to the next one. There.
Oh, perfect, thank you, yes. We wanted to invite everybody in the room and your colleagues to join us in Austin in June for the Texas Injury and Violence Prevention Conference that's being hosted by multiple organizations, many of whom are sitting at the table and being represented by people at the table. The conference will be June 20th through the 22nd, and I've left some conference brochures at the registration table outside. You can register online, or you can use a paper registration form. And we're really excited about this conference. It's the second time Texas has held this conference. It was held back in 2010, in the inaugural year of the conference. And it's a great opportunity at a pretty decent price. It's $150 to register, and it's a 3-day conference, so that's a pretty good deal. And it's an inexpensive way to get access to multiple nationally known experts in injury prevention. So the idea is to bring these folks to us here in Texas so that we can all benefit from their expertise and their tools that they bring to us and kind of advance the field of injury prevention in Texas. We still are taking registrations. We still have room. The conference website has all the information about hotels and fees and how to register online if you prefer to do that. And like I said, there are brochures and packets at the table when you leave. Feel free to pick one up or email me if you have questions.
And I might add that not only are we, is the conference bringing in some national speakers, but we've also got several speakers from within the Texas area. Tammy's going to be talking about the future of the injury data. So, I mean, that's going to be an opportunity to hear more about the trauma registry system and the Texas data that's available. But we're also, we're offering CNEs. Is that right, Courtney? I think I saw Courtney in the room. We're also going to be offering continuing education for social work as well. But there are also concurrent sessions that are going to be focused on, for example, EMS personnel. We're going to have a speaker that's talking about some of the things that EMS is doing in Fort Worth regarding injury prevention and home safety and when they're in the homes and things like that. So there's some creative and innovative things as well. We're going to have a concurrent session on bullying, which is a big issue right now. There's somebody from Texas Transportation Institute that's going to be talking about texting and driving, another big issue. And then in addition, we have just some skill building like grant writing, advocacy, and things like that. So as Juliet says, it's I think it's a good price. It starts at, it's not 3 whole days. It actually starts at noon on Wednesday, June the 20th, and it ends at noon on Friday, June the 22nd. This is kind of a joint effort between Dell Children's, who is really providing funds and logistical support and things like that, but it's also a collaboration between GETAC, TTAF, and TTCF. So we're excited about it, and we'd love to have lots of people, like to see lots of people back in Austin in June, which I know it's hot, but we all live in Texas, so we're used to it anyway. Any other announcements from committee members?
I just want to remind folks as we get ready to go into the summer, we have a couple of different injury issues that are coming up. So if you're looking for things that you can do to get involved with injury prevention or kick off some injury prevention stuff for May. Don't forget that the statewide Click It or Ticket mobilization is kicking off. So you should have some press conferences going on, if not already this week, but next week in your different areas. So certainly supporting occupant protection education efforts is an opportunity. Also with Memorial Day, there is a big push for educating folks about drunk driving prevention. So if that's something that you're interested in getting involved with, certainly you can reach out to a local MAD affiliate. With June kicking off, there's a lot of summer safety and water safety issues to keep in mind as well. So certainly consider partnering with your local Safe Kids Coalition to maybe address some of the things that they're talking about with summer safety and kids. Because, right, it's a fun time, but we want it to be a safe time. And then, of course, with 4th of July, there's some fireworks safety issues. And then again, just kind of a renewed push for encouraging folks to make sure that if they do drink, they get a designated driver. And we'll be launching, with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, we'll be launching some new underage drinking prevention stuff as well around that time, just because we do see a lot of underage drinking going on with 4th of July. So if there's something that piques your interest, this is a good time to just start to raise awareness. The summer's a good time for awareness activities. And then I want to invite everybody on July 27th that the GETAC Injury Prevention Committee is hosting our workday meeting in San Antonio. So come see me. MAD South Texas will be hosting the workday meeting. Our office is close to the River Walk. Yay! So you can come down and have a fun time and talk about injuries and injury prevention, and I just would encourage you to join us because we do want to be able to provide some resources and support for the work that you're doing, and we of course value any input that you can bring for those things. So.
And thanks, Jen. And before we leave, I'd like for the committee members to just let me know if you can attend the workday meeting. What about?
May I offer something? Safe Kids wants to remind everyone about the fatality rate and injury rate to our children who were left in hot cars.
Mm-hmm.
We've already had our first 2 fatalities for the year, one in Texas, one in Missouri. These are totally preventable. We have got to educate and raise awareness with our parents and our caregivers that cars cannot be a safe spot for kids, especially in the summer months. We have got to do something to stop this death. So if you would like information, check with one of your Safe Kids coalitions, because there is media information, handout information that we want to share.
And thanks, Susan. And there may be information on is there a website, like the Don't Leave Your Child, the Texas website, or?
Yes, there is a website for the Texas Task Force dealing with hyperthermia, kids in hot cars, yes.
Any announcements from the audience?
You know, I just have one more question. I don't know if there's anybody even in here who can answer this, but is DSHS still putting together the concussion cards? Is there anybody who can answer that? Okay. Okay. Okay, I was thinking about gearing up for the start of the school year and sports injuries, and that was a tremendous resource, and I certainly don't want folks to forget about that, and I just wasn't even sure if it was still available, so, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for reminding. And as Juliet pointed out, CDC has a lot of information. The Injury Center's website at CDC has a lot of information on, I believe it's called their Heads Up program.
Yes, they have a
and-
great little kit that's got all
Exactly.
sorts of great recommendations in
That,
there.
well, that's good, Jim. We might, as, for the next meeting, we may may have some links from the GTAC website to that, because that's a good point, with two-a-days and football season starting in
Yeah.
the fall.
I mean, I just think about, for us, my daughter was a band member, and they were practicing on concrete for the same length of time. And so, they don't necessarily think about, so I mean, I also think about outside, just from the concussion standpoint, for heat stroke issues from some of our bands. We have some very competitive bands across the state, some very competitive band leaders,
Right.
and our kids are also out there on concrete for many hours in a day with limited access to water, so.
Did I hear another comment, or?
UIL is changing to 1 a day.
Okay.
more hours, but that's school sponsored, there are still kids out there that are planning to get Right. these kids together to still practice at the Right. same time, but Right. it is only supposed to be one time.
Okay, any other announcements? Okay, well, just as a reminder, as Jen said, our next workday, the IP committee will be meeting in San Antonio on Friday, July the 27th. Public is invited, or any other external stakeholders. And then please pick up our information about the Texas Injury Conference, pass it along to others that you might know. This is for, it's not just for trauma coordinators, it's not just for Safe Kids, but it's open to EMS providers as well as anybody who may be working in the area of violence and injury prevention. So with that, the injury prevention meeting is adjourned.
Hey, Shelley, I have a
If I could get your attention, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're having some technical issues we're working through, but we have a full agenda and lots of discussion. I'm going to start by calling roll. Scott Christopher.
Here.
Craig Daniels. Here. Brian Eastridge. Angela Fisher. Mary Frost.
Here.
Jackie Grondek.
Here.
Ruben Lopez.
Here.
Jose Ortiz. Here. Jim Parisi. Lisa Price.
Here.
Craig Ryan. Here. David Reeves.
Here.
David Smith. Here. Ronald Stewart. And Deborah Tappan. So we do have enough for a quorum, is that correct?
Jory, on the roster, there's a sign-in sheet. Would you please have your committee verify their information, their contact information? And if it is okay to post that information on the website, or if you want it used only internally. You know, we post the committee roster on our website, and it has contact information for you guys. But we've realized recently that we didn't have contact information for all of our committee members, so that can be problematic.
Thank you. Are we ready to go, guys?
No, not yet. Just a sec.
Okay. Well. The first item on the agenda is we have some feedback and some follow-up from issues. And so the first issue that we're going to go through as soon as the PowerPoint works is at the last committee meeting, we had asked the TTCF group and Scott Christopher to look at Lisa Price, Jackie, all the trauma coordinators that are on the group, to take the PI recommendations that we had developed and review that. And so there's the Trauma Center Performance Standard as well as the PI initiatives, event issues that went with that. And so they did do that yesterday at the Texas Trauma Coordinators Forum, so we will be giving you some feedback on that. The next item that we asked for feedback was from Dr. Daniels and Marjorie Ligas and Lisa Price, and that was for the TTAF Trauma Division to review the language specific to the Level 3 facilities for those specialty physicians that are not board certified. So we have some feedback on that. And then there will be some feedback regarding the trauma registry issues. So as soon as we're ready to go live.
Your computer's locked up. I'm going to have to restart it. I'm sorry. Restarting. That's just like
Scott, do you want to go ahead and just start the discussion just so we don't lose time?
Yeah.
This computer's about as slow as driving a Datsun. If you can remember what that is.
What the Texas Trauma Coordinators Forum requested to do was to take one final look at these trauma center performance standards and trauma center performance events. Standards are just that, just standards of care as far as how you manage your program and what your how your program ought to be performing. The events are essentially a mirror image of the standards in that when you don't meet the standard, the event occurs, if you will. So we met, a small work group met yesterday morning of, I guess there was probably about 8 or 10, 8 of us or so. And we went through these line by line and made a few little recommended changes. And I'll just go ahead and start reading down them until we get them up on the board. But in no particular order, the first one is EMS will make appropriate triage destinations decisions from the field. We recommended no changes. Trauma team response follows trauma center protocols. No changes. Trauma flow sheet is utilized, paper or electronic. No changes. Trauma flow sheet documentation is complete. No changes. Recommend resuscitation procedures follow ATLS, ATCN, and or TNCC guidelines. The next one we made a recommend change in that it originally read Joint Commission safety goals and never events are integrated into the performance standards. And the discussion is that Joint Commission is a regulatory body, an accreditation agency, but there are others out there that do the same, or that are in the same business. So we felt like it might not be wise to single out a single organization. So our recommendation is to change that from Joint Commission safety goals and never events are integrated to patient quality and safety goals are integrated into performance standards. Okay? Next one, Trauma Center maintains an updated trauma protocol manual that reflects review and revision every 3 years at a minimum. Next one is, there was no changes. Trauma patient timeliness of movement to the operating suite is monitored. No recommendations. Care follows the national standards of care for identified injuries. No changes. The next one we did make some recommendation on. It originally read, trauma patients defined as major or severe are admitted and managed by a trauma surgeon or surgical specialty team. And the conversation we had was, it's, you know, the definition in the Texas rule for a major or severe trauma patient is based on injury severity scoring. Well, that's kind of a end of the visit number. You know, we don't know what their injury severity score is, a true injury severity score is, while they're still in the emergency department. So we looked at some of the recommended language that's in the current rule revisions that's already been submitted to the state, and it reads such to the effect that patients with multi-system injury experience, comma, patients with high energy mechanisms, comma, and or patients with immediate threat to life and limb. We thought that wording was better than major and severe trauma patients. So we incorporated that and said that those kind of patients needed to be admitted, managed by the trauma surgeon or the surgical specialty team. That make sense? Anybody not follow that? Okay. Moving on. If transfer is needed, transfer is completed within 2 hours of arrival. We made no changes. We still think it probably needs to, if, you know, there's been conversation that if you're a level 3, it may be an hour into the visit before you recognize that they have that big acetabulum fracture that needs to go outside your facility. And should the clock start then or when they hit the door? I think the general consensus remains that it should start from when they hit the door. It falls out, but then if it's justified, it's justified, and you can stop it at the first or second level review. Next one, trauma centers will complete the trauma registry data abstraction and entry for all patients meeting their inclusion criteria. The draft that was presented to us yesterday morning said within 60 days of patient's discharge, and we recommended changing that to be within 45 days of patient's discharge. Trauma centers will not utilize trauma diversion, but if needed, it will be less than 5% annually. Next one, trauma center admissions are compliant with their defined admission and transfer guidelines. No recommendations. Trauma center provides a concurrent performance improvement review process. No changes. This next one we made one recommendation. It said trauma center surgeons will maintain required education and credentialing. We recommended that it say trauma center physicians, so that it's not just the surgeons. It can be the emergency medicine guys and everybody else. It's required. And then the next bullet, trauma center staff will maintain the required education and credentialing. Next one, there were no changes. The next one, trauma center maintains participation in injury prevention and outreach trauma education. No changes. Trauma center medical director, trauma program manager, trauma registrar participate in the regional advisory council. It originally read regional trauma advisory council. We just suggest taking the word trauma off. And then we added a bullet yesterday morning, or recommended adding a bullet that says the trauma program manager and the trauma medical director participate in hospital, community, and regional emergency preparedness. Participate. Okay. So that's the standards, except for one I skipped over. I was hoping we'd get the thing up by then, but we combined two. And the first one of these two said that hospitals will have systems in place to activate the trauma team based on information received from the field EMS agency. The problem with that statement is it doesn't cover the walk-in patient that meets activation criteria. The next one talks about the trauma team activation is in compliance with national guidelines for activation. So what we did is we kind of combined those and said that, I'm going to try to do my bit. Here we go. Number 2. This is where I'm at right here. We combined these two to read this. Hospitals will have systems in place to activate the trauma team in compliance with currently accepted guidelines, that used to read national guidelines, based on information received from the field EMS agency or upon identification of activation criteria for patients presenting by non-EMS methods. So, anyway, that's the recommendations of the Texas Trauma Coordinators Forum. And this document is available for y'all's review or ever how the committee chair wants to proceed from here. Questions? Comments? Work group members, anything y'all want to add?
Anybody from the audience want to comment on this?
The events, like I say, are pretty much just mirror images of the standards. And we did make one change on that. Number 8 there was probably the most significant one, where it said delayed movement to the OR. In green is language that was added at the February trauma systems meeting in this room, okay? And we added in February for stat cases. I think Dr. Smith recommended that change. Our recommendation yesterday morning was to further define that and say delayed movement to the OR for hemodynamically unstable patients and or patients with injuries posing immediate threat to life or limb. Just kind of defines stat a little bit better. And then we also added this as an event that wasn't on the list yesterday morning. Trauma patients transferred to a non-designated facility. That should be an event that needs to be looked at. Questions, comments? I'm sorry? It is. It just wasn't on this list of events that we propose to be submitted with the rule revisions that are currently at DISH's office. This will be an attachment, a part thereof, of the new rules to replace the current Level 3, Level 4 standards of care and the Level 3, Level 4 audit filter, recommended audit filters.
No one from the committee has any comments, suggestions? We will bring this back as an action item at the end of the committee then. The next item was Dr. Daniels and the group were asked to look specifically at the language regarding the non-boarded physicians for the Level 3 facilities. Dr. Daniels?
Well, there was a discussion about the current rules say that it meet the non-board certified surgeon, general surgeon, orthopedic, neurosurgeon, and even emergency physicians need to meet the alternate pathway as specified in the latest edition of the Gold Book from College Surgeons. The rules for our level 3s are a little different from what they have in the Green Book, so these conditions have been modified, and sorry I don't have it for the screen, but I'm just going to read you the one for the general surgeon, and then we'll have these up later to review. First would be a letter from the trauma medical director indicating critical need in the trauma program because of physician experience or limited physician resources within the hospital trauma program. Second point, evidence that the surgeon physician has completed an accredited residency-training program in that specialty. Next, documentation of the current ATLS, list of 27 hours of trauma CME over a 3-year period, which is the nine hours that's in the current rules. Attendance of at least 50% of trauma PI meetings, and lastly, performance improvement assessment by the trauma medical director that care provided compares favorably with care provided by other surgeons on the trauma call panels. The rules for the other specialists essentially read the same, with the exception of the attendance requirement for 50% of the trauma actions. Any questions on that? Does that sound?
Dr. Daniels, I don't think they can hear you. You got to talk like Toby Keith.
Should I read it again?
It's not on.
Maybe you need to come over here.
How about that? How about now? Sorry. Okay. Number 1. Letter by trauma medical director indicating critical need in the trauma program because of physician's experience or limited physician resources within the hospital trauma program. Second point, evidence that the surgeon physician has completed an accredited residency-training program in that specialty. Next dash, documentation of current ATLS. Next, a list of 27 hours of trauma CME over the 3-year period, which corresponds to the 9 hours required yearly. Attendance of at least 50% of trauma PI meetings. And lastly, performance improvement assessment by the trauma medical director that care provided compares favorably with care provided by the other surgeons on the trauma call panel. The other specialists essentially read the same with the exception of the 50% trauma PI meeting requirement. Is that better?
I have a question on the CME. Is
Yes.
it, can it, let's say first, second year, nothing, third year, 27 hours, or does it have to be 9, 9, and 9?
Well, I think that's open for
Well, 'cause
defining.
that came up in my center, that's why I'm
Right.
asking.
I think it's an average over a 3-year period. So you could have 27 in 1 year.
That's what the Green Book says.
Yeah.
It's an average.
Because, so,
That would be, yeah, that would be consistent with the ACS definitions.
So we need to clarify that. I think that's the way you have it written.
It says 27 hours of trauma CME over a 3-year period, so I think that would be consistent with that. If,
Any,
other questions from anybody?
Just on the ATLS component, is that maintain current ATLS or just take it once?
No, it's documentation of current ATLS, and that's required anyway.
Would that ATLS count for the orthopedic surgeon and the neurosurgeon as well? For the non-board certified?
I
I think we need to think about that.
Actually, it's only, I'm sorry, that is another difference. It's only on the emergency physician, not
Okay.
the orthopedist or the neurosurgeon.
So the trauma surgeon and
General
the-
surgeon and
the
emergency physician, yes.
Okay.
The one I read was the general surgeon.
called the core surgeons, right? The core trauma panel?
No, I think it's just any of the general surgeons taking trauma call.
Any other discussion from the committee? Anybody from the audience want to comment on that while we're on this subject? Okay.
Thanks.
The next issue is related to the trauma registry validation. Now, this is actually from a meeting that we had, I think back in February in Dallas. And so one of the things that we identified in the February meeting, February 8th, was that there was a huge issue with people sending data to the state with no validation requirements. And so this is the outcome of that. I'm not going to read it to you entirely, but the bottom line is when you send data to the state, the expectation is that you would validate it and make those corrections within 30 days. Anybody from the committee have any thoughts on this?
Majority of those data corrections are just on the required elements, or the required and optionals?
Well, we didn't define that because the expectation was that on all data. Any other discussion from the committee regarding the validation requirements?
We pretty much went through this line by line in February, didn't we? And
Yes.
we solved all our heartburn, and I think Tammy had a few questions, and we clarified some of that. And I think Tammy, Sajak, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in February, we kind of went through this, and you guys were okay with it at the end of that discussion, weren't you?
The critical issue is this is going to be put in the language for trauma center designation in the state of Texas. So everybody that's a trauma program manager in Texas is going to be required to comply with this. So we're going to move forward with this. Okay? Next slide. Now, let me just set the ground. We had a trauma registry meeting on Monday to look at the new registry. Tammy was gracious to be there and do a little presentation. At that meeting, there were several issues that were brought up. And so I'm going to ask Mary to comment on these slides. These are Mary's summaries of these of that event. Go ahead, Mary.
So y'all can hear me. I suppose you all will see the same presentation here that we saw on Monday from the registry. Just to let you know, I am a participating member of the Registry Solutions Work Group, and we had lots and lots of questions on Monday for Tammy that they were very good to stay for an hour and a half and answer for us. But what I realized at the end when I was asked to summarize the notes I had on my piece of paper and on my envelope, that many of the questions that we have revolve around the fact that we do not have a pulled together data dictionary for the registry. Those of us that run registries now, how many of you in the audience have a data dictionary? How many of you regularly refer to your data dictionary? Is your data dictionary your Bible for what you do, what you say, what you enter? It in fact is. What it provides for a registry is the foundation, for those of you that don't have one and would like to have one. And what we originally did, and part of our charge was to come up with the data elements that were going to be put into the registry, and that was step one. We did do that. We went through the NTDB stuff. The state put together some very detailed spreadsheets for us. We went through and talked about what we keep, what we don't keep. We looked at the trauma registry stuff for Texas. What do we keep? What do we not keep? And arrived at a decision. And we gave those updates probably about a year or so ago. What has not occurred is step two. And that's development of the foundation for the registry and pulling those data elements together, both out of the NTDB data dictionary and out of the state data dictionary, into one document that is our roadmap for what we do. It is the roadmap for building the registry. It is the roadmap for providing education. It is the roadmap for talking to our vendors. That's what that data dictionary would do for us. Without this, there's confusion and extra work, and nobody wants confusion, and I know the state doesn't want extra work and having to keep redoing things and answering questions and redoing things because we don't have a roadmap to work by. There is no existing complete data dictionary for the registry, for the state registry. We know that, we're using the NTDB elements, and we know that we're using this, but again, we need a pulled together document. Many of the questions that we had on Monday would have been answered by that data dictionary as well. You can go to the next slide. So I took an excerpt, and I know it's kind of hard to read. This actually comes out of the NTDB data dictionary, and as you can see, what it does is it provides a basis for all those things that I talked about and education. So when you look at this, there's some technical data up there at the top that it can be used for our registry vendor and can be also used for our software registry vendors that we have in the hospitals, our third-party vendors, about what those fields look like, what those values are, what additional information is there. And you can see in the data source hierarchy, that's a piece of education for the trauma registrars. And as we're going through to educate people on this, where do you find that information? And then some associated edits and checks that go along with that. So again, on paper, it lines out each element, tells you what's required, tells you what's optional, gives you all the information that you need, all the information that we need to forward to our vendors. You can go to the next slide. Many of the hospitals right now are in the process of preparing budgets. Budgets are tight. They're very, very tight in everybody's hospital. So we need to be able to provide some very solid information on cost, if there's going to be a cost to adjusting the Texas export for any of our hospitals. What we don't have is a document or anything to provide to our vendors to say, you know what, this is it. This is what the new Texas export is going to look like. So without that, I can't go to clinical data management, Jory can't go to digital innovations. You can't go to your vendor and say, this is what it's going to look like, how much of an adjustment are you going to have to make, and how much is that going to cost me in the long run? As far as reports are concerned, we need to be able to cross-check all those data elements against the reports that we want to run to make sure that we are defining them correctly and how we answer them is going to actually fit with the report that we want to run. So we need to be able to have that pulled together. We need to have that for some of the PI activities in the hospitals. And again, you know, without it, we don't have that roadmap. And then lastly, we need to be able to define those reports. Lastly, education. The education that's going to be provided for the new registry is going to be huge. It's going to be a giant undertaking. And your data dictionary provides you a good majority of that. When my registrar signed on to look at the new registry for the first time, the very first thing he asked me for was the data dictionary. And I said, I don't have one. And he said, so what do you want me to do? I said, I want you to play with it, and I want you to look at it, and the state would like, you know, whatever feedback you can give. So again, we need to have that because we'll understand what the required options are, what the optional elements are. It'll improve data quality by focusing on those required elements. It'll help understand and make reports available for us. And then to understand the full functionality of the registry using both required and optional elements, and we can make educated decisions on how much functionality a hospital wishes to have within their registry. Go to the next one. So again, the data dictionary, at least in our estimation, and at least in my estimation, is absolutely essential for moving our registry forward and for making this go-live date in August or September, whenever that is. It's looming very, very large on the horizon. We need it to provide clarity in putting this together, to prevent the reworks, to prevent the confusion that we're having. We need to be able to use it to build the question packets. It needs to be there to make sure that the wizard, which is the essential elements, is working. We need it to provide to our vendors so we can get a sane estimate on how much this is going to cost us. It provides a basis for what we need to write reports, and it provides the basis for the education of users. So I would say from all the discussion that we had on Monday, one of the things that needed to be taken away is that we need a data dictionary pulled together fast. I've talked to a couple members of the RSWG after that who've committed to sitting down for an 8-hour day, alcohol-free, to pull together this data dictionary and make sure that we've got all the elements there and that we're very clear that what we decided upon initially is actually represented by that, and that hospitals would be able to get that off the first part of June to their vendors so that their vendors can make some intelligent decisions about how much it may cost them to upgrade their registry. So that is all I have. Was that my slide?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so.
These are some critical questions, go to the next slide, that people in the audience ask. So here they are. So again, Tammy's not seen these before. So here's the critical question. Is it time for the Texas Trauma Registry to begin to only focus on being a data repository and data analysis like the National Trauma Data Bank? The question is if the vendor has the expertise, knowledge, and capabilities to build a registry that can do accurate AIS scoring to ISS scoring or PI without commitment of stakeholders who give their time. Is the vendor going to pay the stakeholder salaries for their level of participation? Obviously, when they're not at home doing the work, then something's not done at home. Is there money left to buy registries for all the level 3s and level 4 facilities that do not have a registry in their facility? There was some discussion, we don't really know what that number is, how many facilities actually use a registry outside their institution. And then the last question, can RAC money be used to purchase these registries or to offset that? So these are some of the critical questions that stakeholders are beginning to ask. And so I know that Tammy and them are coming up later. They may not have the answers today, but these are questions that people are going to want answered. And then there's some more slides. Next one. Bert, you want to talk about these?
Yeah. We looked at the website, and for the cancer registry, we know that trauma is the #1 killer in the state of Texas. About 30 people die each day from trauma, and from ages 1 to 44, it is the #1 killer throughout the United States. The cancer registry has 15 dedicated certified registrars, according to the website that was updated May 4th, 2012. We have 0 trauma registrars working on our trauma registry at this time. We do have employees there, but it seems most of them, the background is epidemiology. So what is the timeline for DSHS to hire the appropriate personnel to manage this registry? My trauma center is required by ACS and by DSHS to have a registrar to manage my registry. One would expect the same thing from the state. The next thing is who is dedicated, because Tammy, I see, and this is not, this is respectfully, but I see you listed as a cancer cluster investigator. Is that wrong, or instead of the trauma registry? Okay. Okay. So are you full-time for us, or? Well, that can be something you can answer later. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry.
So at DS, I'm a branch manager, and I've had on average about 10 people in my branch that are DSHS employees, and I've also had contractors in my branch that I manage. So I'm a supervisor who manages staff. That's my job. And in October of 2011, maybe, I was given the injury program because Linda Jones left, and I was asked if I would take that on. At that time, my branch consisted of people who do asbestosis and silicosis surveillance, people who do health studies for environmental exposures, and somebody who does cancer cluster investigations, and a couple of people who do the poison data analysis for the state. So what they did was added the injury program onto that list. And so I started with that, and then about maybe a month ago, we heard that there was a possibility that I was going to be getting some more FTEs. And so in anticipation of that, they took the person who does cancer cluster investigations and the epidemiologist who works on the environmental investigations, and they moved those over to another group manager. I also have 2 people who are working on an ALS study, which should be ending up in July. So I do work full-time, and if I had to hour out my time in the last year, I would say probably 98% of it has been for the injury program.
Sounds like all of us other duties is assigned.
I mean, I'm not trying to be a martyr or anything, but I do work weekends. I work 10, 12-hour days routinely. My days, they go all the way until midnight, 2 o'clock, just depending on what has to get done. So I don't have a regular work routine anymore. I haven't had a life for probably a year and a half at least.
Oh, good.
Looking forward to getting one back.
Yeah, you belong with us. And then last one is just when is Texas going to join the National Trauma Data Bank users group? It's recommended on NTDBS that trauma registrars, that hospitals, state trauma data managers, and hospital-based registrars all be members, and not the vendor, but the state of Texas or whoever our manager is going to be for our national trauma database. Basically, that's all.
Now, I want you to go back. We're not going to do that today. So this, I want to ask a question. So those level 3s and level 4s that don't have a registry, we went through this Monday night. I'm just curious if you would be willing to have a registry at your hospital if there was grant money or some money came to you. Is there any trauma center that's a level 3 or level 4 that would not want to manage their own registry if you had that registry? If you would not, please speak up.
You're saying if somebody came to me and said, we're going to give you a commercial trauma registry, is there anybody in the room that would say, no, I don't want it?
That's correct.
Okay.
And the reason that's important is because the registry requires an FTE, whether it's a part of an FTE or a full FTE. There requires knowledge, expertise to do that registry. So the question is, and the reason that's important is because if we figured out how many registry hospitals, trauma centers that do not have registries, then we could put a dollar amount in there and strive for trying to acquire those dollars somehow, some form or fashion. So that would be one option, to build a Texas registry. The second issue is to try to build a registry. I mean, I don't know, Tammy and the builders, have y'all taken the AAAM injury severity scoring class? And I mean, who in your group and organization has that critical knowledge of how to do AIS scoring? So that's my question. And the reason I ask that question is because we have staff that have that we worked and spent a lot of money on to get to that level, and now they're going to work at the state level, which means stuff in my house is not being done. So it's not just my house, it's a lot of people's. And so people change and they go other places. So the real question to me is how, once we build it, it has to be sustained. And then we've got ICD-10 coming down the pike. How is that going to be managed so that it is a sustainable registry that even after we invest all this time and we build it right, how are we going to be able to maintain it? And those are critical questions, and we're not pointing fingers saying who's doing this. We're really trying to ask, how do we build a registry for the state of Texas that, you know, when my daughter Tori is my age, the registry will work?
Yeah, I've been doing surveillance my whole public health career, and there's a few different models for how you do a state registry. This one is definitely a hybrid of that. And what makes it different than some other registries is that we have all the people who actually work at the hospitals and the EMS agencies reporting directly. Some of the other registries who have registrars, they contract out for those registrars. So it would be as if DSHS had 20 trauma registrars that went around the state. They looked at the charts, they entered in the data into our system. For instance, that's how birth defects works. They have contractors all around the states. So when they're building their registry, which birth defects is right now, much different model than the model that we're building. So when we are having to also think about building something that is also able to be used as if you had your own registry sitting on your desktop, that adds a lot of different needs to building this system than if we were building a system that was mainly focused to collect the data from all the people who are required by law to report the data. So that was in response to what the stakeholders have said that their needs are. And they said that they needed the Texas State Trauma Registry to be able to act as if it was their trauma registry software that they had in their institution. So that has added a lot of complexity and a lot of extra steps that needed to be taken. No, none of us have taken the abbreviated injury or ISS scoring, and that has never been, a part of my career so far as a public health person. I used to, be doing all the HIV and STD surveillance, and guess what? I never took any training on how to do that either, because it's a different type of work that you do as a state registrar than it is as a medical person who is abstracting medical charts and needs to have that medical knowledge behind them. So
Can I ask you a
yes.
question then? Okay, so I get that because I supervise people. The question is, is it the state's intention to hire a person that has that level of training and credentials?
I can't answer that. That came up about 2 weeks ago, Jory. It was the first time anyone had mentioned that to me. And I took it to leadership, and they are discussing it, but I have not received an answer yet.
Okay. It's fair. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, I have a quick question. When we were going over the build, there was an issue with both the AIS module and with the ICD-9 module, and there seemed to be a lack of understanding at that time what the problem was, because the people either at Consilience or that were working on the build didn't understand how the ICD-9 functioned. Can you explain to the group what happened, how that happened, and what we're doing to fix that in order to be able to go live? Because I think this really illustrates the point that we need to have somebody there that can look at that AIS scoring module and go, that's not correct. That's not going to work. That's not how it's going to work. Or is able to at least put the functionality in the registry for the IC9 that we can download on our iPads.
We took the data elements that are in the current registry. We took the data elements from NTDB, and that's what we provided to our vendor, and that's what we modeled. And in the current trauma registry, the AIS and the ICD scoring is not set up the way that you guys would like it to be set up in the new system. No, we didn't have the knowledge of how it should be set up. I'm, happy to admit that. That's the truth. And so we did get some really good feedback about how it should be set up. But, that feedback we've been open to receive the feedback for how it should be set up for all of this time that we've been working on it. It just now recently has been brought to our attention that it's not set up correctly. We have shown the product before in the past, and we've been showing it to the people in our work group for a long time now. I don't know why it just only now just came up, but it did just only now come up, and we are working on that and addressing that. We do take all of the feedback and all the recommendations that you all have made very seriously, and I don't think that you can probably find an example of when we haven't given you a response back to anything that you've brought to us since I've been managing this program. I can't speak for whatever happened before me, but I do, take really good notes, and I do get back to you guys on everything that you bring up. So we haven't brought the information to the vendor. I can't really blame it on them that they didn't do work that I didn't ask them to do. When I do take it to them and explain how it needs to be built, it will be built that way. So it's just a lack of communication and knowledge about how you all wanted it to be built.
Tammy, I think I first want to say thank you for being here and thank you for meeting with us on Monday night. To me, this is not really about you or anything about what we're trying to do. The real question is, from the stakeholder standpoint and the state standpoint, do we really want to build a registry that has AIS, ISS, and PI in it? Knowing that those things change, they update, which will require additional work. Or do we want to build a data repository system so people can send that data, and it's easy to change that data, or easier, and then do data analysis? I think that is a critical question that everybody in the audience should think about. Everybody up here needs to think about. Everybody at the state level needs to think about. Because it's dollars, it's time, it's commitment. There are people that are willing to be committed to that. Those people who are willing to be committed today, tomorrow may have different jobs, different lifestyles, and they can't do that. So I'm just very cautious about building something that leans on a lot of stakeholder participation to manage and to keep the continuum moving forward. That's my concern. I'm going to be real honest about that. The question is, if we make that decision, how do we get registries into those places that don't have registries? So I think it's a critical question, and I don't know if there's any money left in that bucket of money that was to build the new registry.
The money was a grant from TxDOT, and it was a match from DSHS. And of course, anytime you have a grant, you have it all spelled out how you're going to use the money, and if you want to use it a different way, then you have to change that. That grant funding cycle is just about to an end at the end of September. That ends. October 1st starts a new funding cycle. Those monies do not get carried over because it is the end of a funding cycle. So we have applied for additional funding through TxDOT, but we won't know whether or not we were successful in getting that probably till end of June maybe.
Okay. It's 3:17. We still have several agenda items. Is there anybody in the committee that wants to make any comments on this?
I just want to ask a question, backing up a step or two to the data dictionary. It was 6 months ago that the Registry Solutions Work Group / Epidemiology gave us a presentation on the data elements. Then in that presentation, it compared what data elements were going to go into this registry compared to the National Trauma Data Bank, which elements were going to go in this registry compared to NMSIS, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess my assumption at that point in time was, since those data elements had been decided upon, that a data dictionary would be shortly forthcoming. And I guess based on, Mary, what you got, the flavor I got from you a while ago is that data dictionary is not being built yet and it doesn't exist. And of course my thinking is we want to go live with this in just a few months, and we don't have a data dictionary. And so my question is what's the plan for a data dictionary? Who's responsible for creating it?
The data elements have changed since the Registry Solution Work Group made their recommendations. We have updated you on the changes as they happen. A lot of those changes had to do with the NMSIS not being finalized, and even after it was finalized, theoretically, it still has continued to change. So if we had built a data dictionary, it would need to be revised again. Just recently, when we started working on the hospital wizard, going through the validations and getting to the performance improvement part, a whole bunch more questions are being added. So yes, we could have produced a data dictionary. It would need to be revised as we go along. And you know, every program that I have worked in not only has a data dictionary, which defines what each element is, which is actually pretty simple to create, especially when you're using national standards, but every program has had a manual of procedures. I've not seen a manual of procedures for the trauma registry. When I was in other programs, I actually led work groups of people who were out in the field to create those manual of procedures. And I'd be more than happy to do that again, because that's really what is needed here. People really need to have a notebook indexed that they can go to that tells them how they are to do a particular thing. And I think that everything you guys have said about the need for a data dictionary is true. I openly admit that the data dictionary on our website has been out of date. It was way out of date before I came on board. It has just been this static document for years. That has been an issue. You have a legitimate concern that you're voicing, and we do need a new data dictionary to reflect our new system. I don't think the data elements are locked down yet. I don't think we can produce a data dictionary that won't get changed several times before September. I would think that once we have some kind of consensus on whether or not that we are building this extensive performance improvement module, because that's adding a lot of changes. So once we have consensus on that, once we have consensus on whether or not people want to abandon the notion of collecting any data elements except for what is required by NTDB or NMSIS, once we have those decisions from our stakeholders, then I think we're ready to produce a data dictionary. Because I have heard some talks and some discussion in the last few days that it's going to cost a lot of money perhaps for vendors to make modifications to their current software to produce something that is a hybrid of NTDB and the current trauma registry, and that perhaps it's easier just to rely on NTDB and NMSIS. So once those kinds of decisions have been made by our stakeholders, they've given us some clear direction on where they'd like to go, then we can lock down a data dictionary. But we need a manual of procedures to go with it as well.
In talking to the stakeholders, we do want a data dictionary now, and we're willing to put it together with the elements that we've agreed upon now, with the knowledge that we may have to adjust it, but adjustments are easy. We don't want to wait until the end and try and put it all together then. We need it now. And we're willing to pull people together to do it, even here in Austin, for a long workday in order to make it happen, so that you don't have to dedicate resources and things. You guys can keep marching forward. But we find the whole process of validation for the registry very difficult because we do not have this document.
I agree with that. I'm thankful for the offer of the assistance. I think it'll actually be really easy because 85% of the questions are NTDB. They already have a data dictionary. So we adopt their data dictionary, and then we have how many ever other data elements that we need to work on together, and some of those are already defined as well. So I don't think it's a huge endeavor. I do think it will change.
but that will answer a lot of questions, and that will help a lot of hospitals talk to their vendors about what that potential cost is going to be. So if it's that easy, then we just need to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tammy.
Yep.
We've heard a lot from the trauma centers. Are there any EMS providers that want to make a comment? I would imagine that that's going to be addressed through the EMS committee, but I just want to make sure we offer equal opportunities here. Okay.
One more comment. Garrett, are you in the room? Be on point in case I say this wrong. Tuesday morning, the chair and co-chair of the TTCF Registries Group talked to the Level 3 and Level 4 committees of the Texas Trauma Coordinators Forum, and they basically went through